The world's largest outdoor saltwater pool is now open at Palisades Amusement Park. Come on over.
I hate to interrupt this fiasco this way, so calm and so easygoing. But Gene Shepard, old friendly, reliable Shep, I'm on vacation by request of the management. They said, get the devil out of here. You're beginning to get on our nerves. So I am on vacation this week, and all this stuff you've been hearing for the last X numbers of minutes, I presume, has been me on tape from the limelight. We have selected one of our least offensive tapes to play for you tonight, and we hope that you're getting a moderate charge out of it. I certainly am. There's nothing like being transcribed. Wouldn't it be great if your whole life could be transcribed and you could go on a lifetime vacation and just play that tape at the agency and let it go, and they'd keep sending you the checks? Well, that's what I've done. Oh, yes. Well, let's get back to this thing and see how it goes, shall we?
Hold it. Now. You can see why dictators get gray. You get them all well trained, and what do? They all leave for the little room under the stairs at the crucial moment. All right, let's hear the password, gang. Go! You fathead! Hey! Oh, boy, what a fiasco. You can tell this is definitely a holiday. Hey, it's more than that. We're back at the limelight now in Sheridan Square. And do you think we can get any more in here tonight, Kels? Yes. All right, everybody who's listening, come on down. There are plenty of seats, right? Come on down. Come on down. Oh, what a rotten trick. I can see guys racing down the Jersey Turnpike. It's like the time we formed the human pyramid out of Jones Beach. Do you remember that? Yeah. Well, were any of you there? No. Well, I want to tell you what happened one Saturday on the air. I said, now look, there must be at least 40,000 of you out there who are secretly buried in little piles of sand at Jones Beach and have got a transistor radio. Now you're surrounded by the klotzes. The Jones Beach knuckleheads. With the hot dogs, doing the muscle stuff and walking around with the rock and roll on the radio, I says, now, to really confuse them, because one thing that the klutz has got in his mind is a firm belief that he understands everything about the world. The true knothead really believes there are absolute answers, and he's got them. Have you ever seen the editorial policy of the Daily News? I remember reading one that simply, the entire foreign policy was bomb them! That kind of simple thing. And it must be nice to have the world in little things like that, It's just a great feeling. Really, I think ignorance and klotzhood, to have cottage cheese between the ears must be the greatest of all blessings. Really, maybe a little yogurt thrown in, maybe just a touch of plastic to hold it together, and to sit out there and think that Smilin' Jack is really a good comic. I love this. Have you ever gone over to a Smilin' Jack fan sitting there, on BMT looking at that? And you go over and you say, that's very good. Do you read Peanuts? He says, Peanuts, never eat them. They get in my teeth. Well, one Saturday morning, this is exactly what happened. I said, now listen, let's really make these guys get scared. Nothing scares a true klutz more than the unexplained happening. No, seriously. He figures he's got it all figured out when suddenly something happens outside of the norm of what he thinks the world is. This is very confusing to the guy that's doctrinaire, the real klutz. So I says, now listen, all those guys that got the rock and roll going, and those guys that are watching the Yankee games, and I'm on Saturday morning. See, it's morning. Jones Beach. It's about 11th. It's a beautiful day, you see. I says, all those guys that can hardly wait for the ball game to come on and that are going back and forth to the hot dog stands, let's prepare a little gambit for them. Don't say anything, and when I give you the cue, don't say a word. All of you arise as one man, carry a white towel. At the count of 3, wave it in the air without saying a word, and walk towards number 6 beach. All of you. Those at number 6 beach all stand at attention and wait for the others to arrive. And then I will give a command, and at the command we will all form silently and with great style a human pyramid. Watch the Klutz's faces. I predict within 30 seconds the fuzz will be on its way. Well, here's what happened. I gave the cue. I says, all right, now let's go. Keep your radios turned down real quiet so they won't know. Okay, now, all of you on your feet now. 1, 2, 3, wait now. Go. And with that, this great army rises. They all stand. I says, face the ocean now for 1 moment, as though you have a mission. A deep, mystical mission. Now, at the count of 3, wave your towel symbolically 3 times toward the ocean. All right, now, 1, 2, 3, hold it, wave. 1, 2, 3. Now, towel down at side with a snap. That's it, down. Now, all of you right face and walk slowly with great deliberation towards beach number 6, saying not a word en route. Absolutely straight face, walk now. There was a silence. And I'm in my studio over here on 1440 Broadway, you know, right in the middle of a hot, sweltering city, and somehow I could feel the electricity. I could just hear the sound of countless feet scrunching through the sand. I could hear the sound of guys saying, hey, what the devil is that, man? Where are they going? Where are they going? And then I said on the radio, I said, now listen carefully. I said, you will notice some of the klotzes are beginning to rise and they're falling in. And sure enough, guys with bikini bathing suits were getting up, you know. I says, now keep going, and in 10 minutes, I will give the human pyramid command, which will be one of the big events in the state of New York this year. It will be reported in every police blotter on Long Island. I said, now, all right. The minutes went by, and I could see those fantastic columns of people just walking, holding their towel, carrying their beach balls, just walking. And then, 10 minutes later, I said, all right, all of you now get ready. On my command, face the ocean together. Face. Now turn all the way around, and at the count of 3, pyramid. 1, 2, 3, go. And now let's go up to Fred Feldman for the traffic. And this Fred is up there in his helicopter over Long Island. And he is flying out over Queens Boulevard. You can see Jones Beach down there. And Fred, you can hear the funny thing in his voice. You know, you can't describe a traffic jam on the beach with 18,000 people. No, he's watching. Well, let me tell you, there was a 7,000 people high pyramid. It just slowly formed, pile after pile, and then suddenly from all points of the compass you could hear sirens. And one of my spies is in one of those little hot dog stands out there. He says, Shepherd, he says, for God's sakes, you ought to see it out here. He says, the fuzz is pouring out of the administration building. They got flamethrowers. He says, so don't tell me, I'm telling you that when it finally wound up, I ever tell you about the time we had the great towel waving? Let me tell you what happened there. I said, let's face it, there really are two kinds of people. There really are. There are those klutzes, and there's us. Nothing makes the audience feel better, Hey! We're the very hip people, aren't we, gang? Of course. We're certainly the in crowd, aren't we? Yeah, 75-cent hot dogs, you're sitting there. Where do you... Well, I on the air one day, I says, now listen. I says, there has been more than one marriage broken up, more than one human relationship busted up, because the people do not recognize, really, that there are two types of people. There are the guys that believe it all. I mean, who go to the World's Fair and they stand outside of the Bell Telephone Building and say, ain't that pretty? And they go to that... Have you seen the Chrysler Building? It looks like a big plastic V8 motor there that needs a valve job. It's standing there, There's those guys, and then there's the other guys. There really are. They're just two kinds of guys. So I said, wouldn't it be great if you knew, other people like this? I said, here it is. It's a Saturday morning. The whole crowd they're all out. They're all over the country. They're driving around. They're playing rock and roll. Wherever you are now at this point, wherever you are, wave a towel and look around. Well, they started to wave towels. They were waving towels up in New Hampshire. They're waving towels down in the Bahamas. But one fantastic thing happened. This is an actual truth. I got a long letter about 3 months later. There's a guy laying on his roof right here in Manhattan. It's a hot, rotten day, and he's got the transistor. And so I say, jump up and wave your towel. Well, there he is, He was using his towel for something else, So he says, okay, if it's for God and country. So he whips his towel off and he starts to wave. Well, I'm telling you the truth. Don't lie. It's a very interesting thing. About 7 blocks away, he sees another roof. The towel going. It is a chick. He said he had the greatest Saturday of his life. Well, I just thought you ought to know there's a lot of stuff going on out there. Hey, speaking of that, we're all sitting around down here. Let us pause just 10 seconds and think inside of your mind, just for one 10-second moment, of all the fantastic things that are going on right now. And you're eating pizza. Think of it. No, seriously, think of all these things. Now, we will give you another 10 seconds to mull something over even more important. Of all the things in the world, anything you know of, if nobody knew and you could get by with it, what most would you like to be doing right now? Well, what's the matter, gang? I could see one guy sitting down there. He says, yes, I'd like to be renting a rowboat on Diamond Lake to fish for sunfish. Isn't it fascinating how our minds work? I'm sure that all of you thought of, I'd like to have a caramel corn. Right? Oh, yes, it's very subtle. The fears that run through us. Look at how embarrassed everybody looks. What's the matter, gang? Well, the fears that run through us are very basic. Yes, it is true. He says to his friend, it's true. Notice his glasses are clouded up. He was thinking of having a big triple dip ice cream cone. Oh, yeah. Well, let me tell you, though, the fears that run through us are very subtle fears, like this kind of thing. We don't even have to discuss that. Wow. No, the fears are very deep. I'll never forget one time when I'm a Boy Scout. Somebody asked for a Boy Scout story. Well, I'll tell you a Boy Scout story that's very closely connected with this problem. I am a kid, see. I'm a city kid. Now, city Boy Scouts are very different from the kind of Boy Scouts you read about in Boy's Life, the Scout Handbook, How are you going to go out and mark the north side of birch trees? In South Chicago, it's very tough, How are you going to go out and blaze a trail through the stockyards? By looking at moss. There was plenty of stuff to look at in the stockyards, but it wasn't moss. Well, so there we are, we're in the middle of this world, and we had this great scout leader named Mr. Gordon. And Mr. Gordon was a very early Mr. Peepers. And he, there's nothing more. I'll tell you, scout leaders are very funny guys. Most of them are guys who at one point or another, it's very hard to describe them, but they have an officer complex. They feel like it's a little quasi-military. Oh, yeah. They pretend, they're interested in the boys. But what they like to do is say, all right, attention, gang, get out your ropes, tie, sheepshank, tie. And the kids are tying. Oh, yeah, I was a member of the Moose Patrol. Great big fat moose, the nose hanging down. Everybody else was in stuff like the Leopard Patrol. I'm in the Moose Patrol. They had the worst patch in the world, a big fat moose. And our patrol was like that, kind of fat and messed around. And I was in the Moose Patrol. Well, every Wednesday night when we would meet, we would have assignments. Like Mr. Gordon would say, now we're going to work on the bowline knot. I want all of you to be able to crack that bowline knot. I want to be 13 seconds, like boom, like that. I want you to know the granny from the square knot. How many of you still can't tell the difference here? Any of you like to have a few tricks in tying the square knot as opposed to the granny here? See, this is a boy world. It really is. Women are looking at me dumbly and saying, when you start talking about something important. And every male here knows the problems of kids that can do stuff. Kids that can make things. They make great model airplanes. And yours has got all the lumps on it, And they got that stretched tight skin, those other kids. And you never could figure out how to get the paper without the wrinkles all over. You'd spray it, and stand back and it would go whoop. Girls don't know about that, stretching paper. Well, we used to have things like kite contests. And I would go home, and I'd make a kite. It'd take me like 3 days. And I go out and I get paper and I make the whole thing and I come back with my kite, my little kite like this. I've worked on, I've sweated, and in would come Watts. He's got this fantastic kite that looks like a biplane, has birds hanging on it, 20 minutes later, it's 4 miles in the air, and I'm standing with my little kite. Well, this is a boy world. Well, the Boy Scouts all revolve around that, and one of the important things during I was a Boy Scout during the absolute peak of the Depression. Really like owning a hat with a helmet and the goggles, This was a major wearing apparel item. And the idea of owning a scout uniform was just, it was just theoretical. And you'd get Boys Life, and you see these kids with the big hats, with the neckerchiefs and the stuff and the pants, and they've got all stuff hanging here, canteens. Look at it. All I got is a pair of knickers, see? And I'd pull them tight so they look like those high water pants, pull them down, pull your socks up. So I began to gradually, like all the rest of the kids, you'd pick up little items. Like for birthday, I would get a neckerchief. which is a big gold and blue thing that goes around, and you'd make a sheep's horn helmet, thing goes up like that, see, the slider. And I'd go there dressed in my corduroy pants, my helmet with the goggles, my sheepskin coat, and my neckerchief. Hang it down. My one item of apparel, I'd stand there. And there's always about 3 kids that got the uniforms. In every troop. It's been, for years, it's been my real ambition to own a formal suit. The kind you can wear to functions. Then I don't have to go to these joints on 6th Avenue anymore, stand there. It's very embarrassing. Women don't rent clothes. I don't think women have ever had the indignity of wearing a suit that 65,000 guys have worn before you. And God knows what they have done in them. I'll tell you, one time I rented a tuxedo and I wore it all night, and then without thinking, I stuck my hand in the inside pocket. It was fantastic. What happened in that pocket, I can't describe here. All night I'm standing there with my coat pulled up. I can't figure, who was this? Was this King Kong that rented his coat? What was it? I don't know women ever renting clothes, but men have all known this indignity. And I remember one time going up here to 6th Avenue, one of these places, see, and I go in and I say to the guy, I got to have a suit. I was doing an MC job someplace where they have the lapels and the black tie and the whole jazz. And I go, this actually happened to me. I go in there, the guy measures me. He goes back. Now listen to this, women. This is something you will never hear described, because the men who you go out with dressed in those things do not tell you what has gone on before, nor how much it costs just to rent that rotten cheesecloth coat. Well, I'm standing there waiting by the mirror, and there's a couple of guys with high hats. It's really funny to see little fat guys putting on big high hats. You wonder, what the devil are they going to? Putting on big hats with white coats, and their things are popping out, and they got little black buttons, and they walk around. Well, I'm standing there in the middle of this, trying to look like I always do this. You try to look casual. And the guy says, you want a shawl drape or straight around? Shawl drape or straight around? Shawl drape. I said, shawl drape. There's a pause. He says, shawl drape, are you sure? And immediately I can see myself wearing something that Lincoln might have worn, Like it's a stovepipe hat, the things with the big tails hanging out. And I say, no, better make it this time straight. And he says, you sure? This is what happened. I'm telling you, I don't know anything about evening clothes, So I says, yeah, all right. Go ahead, make it straight, yeah. So he says, gee whiz, I don't know what I got your size. I don't know what I got your size, man. And then you hear another guy named Sam in the back. There's always these guys behind the scenes there. He says, hey, Manny, that number 4 just came in. He says, it's his size. Give it to him. And the first guy says, well, I don't know. Is it ready to go out? He says, no, we'll have it ready. And he brings this suit out. And he looks at me and he says, this just came in. We'll have it cleaned and fixed up before tomorrow night. I don't know what happened to the guy wearing this suit. It must have been a gang war. I'll tell you, it was covered with stains like I never saw outside of a gangster movie. And he holds it up behind me. He's holding it up, and I'm looking in the mirror. He says, right across the collar. He says, okay, it's 40, straight ahead, short, medium, 32, right, okay. And he takes it. And I don't know what to say. Gee, I don't like that one with a bullet hole there in the shoulder. It's terrible. I mean, what happened to that guy? What did they do to him? Is he all right? And you don't know what to say. And I says, well, maybe you better try the drape around model. He says, all right, let's go, next one. And they're always in a hurry. These guys, isn't that true? These guys give the impression that you're lucky to get it. You're very lucky. And the last one of your model just went out, and they have dug this one out. It's the owner's own suit. That kind of thing. So I am down on the street. I'm worrying about this, and the next day I go in. You should have seen that suit. Beautiful. It's got cellophane on it. It's all sealed, all around. The white coat is just laying there. I don't know whether they vulcanized it or what. I put that suit on that night, and somehow wearing a gangster suit, I'll tell you, it gives you authority. In fact, I wondered why the tuxedo manufacturers don't say the Al Capone model, the Tony Martin model, Well, let me tell you what happened with the Boy Scouts. This is all part of that world, the world of men's clothing, which you never hear discussed in books. Women talk about their clothing by the hour. Men do not ever discuss it, really. Well, getting this Boy Scout uniform was like climbing the pyramids to me. And I remember one birthday. My birthday is in July. And I am hoping, I'm just frantically hoping, that I'm going to get a uniform. They're going to get me the whole thing with the shirt. And that afternoon, the package, they sing happy birthday to you. And they've got the cake. And there's a big box. And I open it up, and there is a pair of corduroy knickers. I'm telling you the truth. And my mother says, I want you to go down to the store and pick out one piece of Boy Scout equipment. That was a big gift. So down to the store I go 2 days later, and I'm standing there. Now, I don't know what it is with men. The first thing that a man will pick, strangely enough, is a hat. Hats have great symbolic meaning to men. Oh, they really do. A general is nothing without a hat. That's true. Any hat that you have, and I don't wear hats, but somehow putting a hat on means something. It really does. It's a subtle thing. And throughout all the centuries, the mystique of hats has been written about. And so right there in the middle of that case is a real Boy Scout hat. What a hat. Now, you remember that hat that they had with the big flat brim? The beautiful hat? Yeah, it was a big hat, felt hat, had a big Boy Scout emblem on the front, and it had this braid that came around, with the two little things. And I said to the guy, I'd like to see the hat. And he looks at me, he says, all right, and he reaches in, picks it up, over the counter, and I take this hat, this felt hat, and I could smell it. Oh, boy. Smells new, and it's got a solid feeling, heavy. It's got leather inside. I put this thing on, stand there. He says, it's very good on you. He says, you make that hat. You look very good in that hat. And I stand back with that hat on. It sets down over the ears. I can feel that badge. And I'll tell you, there was never anything in my life I fell more in love with than that hat. I said, I'll take it. It's great. He says, it fits you. My ears are like this, He says, it fits you. And then he says, shall I put it in a bag or will you wear it? Well, kid who wants to wear it. I says, well, put it in a bag. I'm thinking to myself, going out, taking it, putting it on. I want to be cool. So he puts it in a bag, he clips it, he's writing the thing out, and he says, that will be $11.50, please. I had $2. 2 big bananas. This was the Depression. My father was earning $31.50 a week. He was earning $31.50 a week for 10.5 hours, 6 days a week, and I knew it. Most kids don't even know how much their dads earn, Well, one night at 4 a.m, I heard a gigantic argument in which the subject came up. And it had bothered me ever since. Oh, it's terrible. I heard my mother say, what are we going to do? You only earn $31.50 a week. We can't get another used car. And the old man says, $31.50, a lot of guys are not working. What do you mean? She says, you're barely working. You're just hanging on by your feet. And I'm sitting there, ooh. I'm in my bed hearing this. My old man is barely hanging on by his feet. You don't want to know about these things. Money, $31.50. I've got $2 and the hat. And I say to the guy, well, maybe it's too big. And he says, well, all right. I think immediately, men are grown-ups, can read. I think immediately he realized this kid has not got the scratch. And he's going to let me down easy. He's not going to say, all right, come on, kid. You don't have the money. Don't bother me. He says, listen. He says, I've got another hat. He says, hold on. He goes back and he comes out with one of the cloth ones, that you pull down, the overseas type. This was known as the fatigue scout hat, you see. And he says, try this one on. So I put it on, but let me tell you, it ain't the same thing. Just ain't. So I put it on, and he says, gee, that looks a lot better than the other one. He says, that really looks good on you. Come on, come over here. He says, put it on a tilt. So I put it on. I'm standing there. He says, that's beautiful. He says, that's the hat. That big hat makes you look like you're all ears. You don't want to look like a little fire plug with feet. He's convincing me, and I'm saying, well, yeah. And he says, and that hat is only 75 cents. So I said, I can get out with my feet dry. So I said, oh, well, all right. So I take out $1. He gives me a quarter back. And he says, anything else? Anything else? He saw my dollar. I says, yeah. Do you have any second-class pins? I'm a second-class scout. Now, girls, you don't know about that, but many a man grew up only a second-class scout. They had ranks, they had everything in the Boy Scouts, and I was a second class, so I buy a second-class pin, and I go home. And then it began. Once you start on a thing, once you have a taste of the officialdom, you can't stop. Up to that point, I had made peace with the patrol, But now I want the suit. It's terrible. It's terrible. Believe me, I know why guys with $40 million want the 41st. It's terrible. Guys with no money don't really worry about it, It's true. They walk around and scratch. The guys with the dough are really the guys that are working. Have you noticed that all the big multi-billionaires are always yelling that the taxes are too high? You notice that? You never see an old, little old guy working for $42 a week on, boy, them income taxes. Oh, man. Oh, the income taxes. It's Barry Goldwater all the way for me, I say. I'm an Ayn Rand man, boy. Yeah. Listen to the Goldwater nuts here. Well, and they've all made it. You notice that? They're the snotty ones. Well, the fascinating part of it all is, of course, I was tasting the hat, and the thing, and I wanted the uniform. And I began to develop an insane desire to own a scout knife. Now, the scout knife, a knife like a hat, is very important symbolically. Have you ever walked up and down, even in Abercrombie and Fitch, the most pleasant of stores? This is the most esoteric of non-sporting stores in the world, Always in the middle window is a collection of giant hunting knives. Have you seen that? Great big toad stickers. You can't imagine this Ivy League guy walking in. That little black suit, the little tie with his $40 shirts. He says, in the center window, next to the giant inflatable Queen Mary there, and the man who looks like C. Aubrey Smith says, you mean the toad sticker? And he looks around, he says, yeah. And 10 minutes later, he's got it in his hand. He says, I'm just shopping. He's looking for one with a curved blade with barbs on the end, I'm serious. Have you ever in your life hefted an executioner's axe? Well, I have a friend who is the curator of a museum in Philadelphia. One Saturday, when the museum is closed for repairs, I am going through this thing, and they've got all the stuff. You're used to seeing the stuff in cases. You ought to see it when it's laying there. You ought to see it when there's a skeleton of an Egyptian there, and he's all twisted up, It's right out there. You step over him, and it's really there. And we get into this medieval armor. He says, look at this stuff, and it's fantastic. All the men love to go to the armor section over here on 81st. You ever been in that place? Oh, it's fantastic. German armor, you know. Can you imagine yourself going in with a Saxon knight's chainmail, breastplate, buskin, and helmet Monday morning into the office? Just walk in, you know, with your big plume behind you. That's all right, honey. Your big plume flying behind you, you know, and you've got a halberd. And swinging here is a 74-pound mace with the big knob on the end, with the thing sticking all over it, you know. I'll tell you, there must have been a great joy, and, you know, like this, boom. And they'd say, Sir Mordred has a fantastic follow-through. You know, look at that backswing. Boom. He's going like this. And then they bring it around again. Have you ever seen those medieval knights work? We have an idea about knighthood in flower. Wow. Let me tell you, those guys carried things you wouldn't believe. And I'm walking around in this section, see, and right there is an executioner's axe that was an old English, true antique artifact. It's got a handle like that. The end of this thing, it has its blade, you know, that goes like this. You know? And he says, pick it up. Well, that thing felt better than a beautiful, well-balanced Stan Musial Hillbrick Slugger model. These guys, you could see these guys carrying it home, you know, polishing it. I pick this thing up and I give a couple of, you know, wow. I'll tell you, the whistle of an executioner's axe is an absolutely unbelievably poignant, and it's an unforgettable sound. You know, like that. It staggers around. He says, no, they didn't use it that way. He says, watch. And they have this big block, an executioner's block. He says, watch. This is the way it went. He'd say, you put the the subject's head here on this side, see, and over here with his body, and over here's a basket, see, and out here is sawdust, and over here's the crowd, all waiting. Over here's the king. He says, they stand at attention. And then when the command is given, they are wearing a thing, you know, with the eyes. That's also a good feeling, wearing a mask. Why do you think all these secret, rotten societies wear masks? Gives you a real sense of power, a mask. Do you know that being able to identify another man is a way of taking away a kind of power that we all have? To be known is somehow to be attenuated, to be faded down. This is why so many GIs walking into a town unknown did things they never in their skull would think of doing. Back home in Hessville, on the Grand Concourse. I wonder how many guys who were in the Army got things sticking back in their mind of stuff they did on Saturday nights in little German towns, or stuff they did while walking along the road one day on a hot, dusty afternoon while the infantry division was on the advance, and these civilians, oh boy, we are interesting creatures. And so he says, look, it is done this way. They pull the mask down, they stand at attention, and the official reads a Latin inscription, E mordicus in haec hoc en mortifus in est spitalauk. He says, then you face the crowd and bow. This is the way the executioner did it. This is the Mickey Mantle of his time. He's known as Old One Swipe Mordred, with the fantastic follow-through. And then he stands at attention and bows to the subject, and then takes his axe and holds it thusly. He places his left foot forward. This is really the way they did it. And he lays the axe about 1.5 inches above the vital spot. Just like this. He looks down, then usually step back for a second. They were all showmen, you know. Wipes his hands, picks up a little dust, kicks the dirt from his cleats, steps forward. This is really the way it was done, though. And then it went back over the shoulder like this. The foot went out, and down it came. Junk. And as it came down, the crowd would whistle with the axe. Did you know they did that? It would go, boom. And then there would be a fantastic roar of applause. He would bow and walk off. Well, so there I am on a Saturday afternoon in the University of Pennsylvania's museum, you see. Now, why? Wait a minute. Before speaking of executioners, what station is this? AM and FM. New York. Where are we? New York. Let's go.
Oh, you son of a gun. And, by George. Oh, yes, and one more thing. If you are not living in New York and you have not read The Village Voice, you have not tapped a really open, naked nerve of this city. As a matter of fact, The Village Voice is probably the most prize-winningest newspaper to come about in the country in the last 5 or 6 years, and unquestionably one of the most continually irritating, interesting, wildly misinformative newspapers that's ever been printed in this country. And as a matter of fact, I've taken The Voice myself since about 1956, and I have been hooked. The way some people get hooked on Ovaltine. This is The Village Voice, really. It's a weekly, it's wild, it's interesting, and it tells more about America, I think, than most of the more serious, pompous newspapers that are around. And if you would like to subscribe, send your name and address to Village Voice, Gene Shepard, Sheridan Square, New York. It's $4 a year, and it's a big $4. The Village Voice, the Village Voice, the Village Voice, the Village Voice.
You want to hear the rest of the story about the knife? Yeah. Well, you know, I'll tell you. The knife has always been very symbolic. Psychologists have written about it. Historians have written about it. Poets have talked about knives. Women don't quite understand this. Do you know that almost all the great kingdoms of the past were somehow based on a great sword? Do you know the legend of Excalibur? Yeah. Why Excalibur? Did you see the picture of Cassius Clay in one of the African republics recently in a magazine? It shows him trying to pull a sword out of the ground. He did not turn out to be King Arthur, though. He tried to pull it. So the swords have been very important. Well, I'll tell you, there were about 6 kids. Do they still have scout knives, really? Really, they do? Well, a scout knife is a knife that has a black bone handle. I will describe it to you exactly. It's a heavy knife, about this long. It's got a black bone handle, and right in the middle of it is that most rare of all things, the official Boy Scout seal. It's got the Boy Scout... No other knife makes it. No other knife. And it has in it about 3 blades that fold out. It's got a corkscrew. It's got a little screwdriver. It's got all kinds of little things, you know. It says, kids, be prepared for any emergency. A corkscrew, you know. I mean, it says, be prepared. You don't open ketchup bottles with that, you know. It says, be prepared for any emergency, kids. Own a real, genuine Dan Beard model Boy Scout knife with a genuine bone handle. It will carry you through many a desperate experience in the woods. You know, you read this stuff and wow. And so you would hang, the really important thing about a scout knife was hanging it from the belt loop. There was a belt loop, you'd hang it this way. And it was hung almost like a badge of honor. Almost like the ceremonial sword of an officer. Yeah, all officers, you know, in the big armies have little ceremonial tin swords that mean that they're mystically endowed. That's right, he gets that. Yeah, they have something the PFCs don't have, I'll tell you. And so, oh, listen, I'll never forget that. I hate to interrupt myself here. Well, what is it? Life is one long interruption anyway, let's face it. I mean, I saw one time one of the saddest sights that I ever saw in the Army. I don't want to do an Army story, but since this is the Memorial Day, I want to tell one story that has to do with a sword and in the Army. Hey, where's everybody going here? Come on, get going, man. Come on. You can wait. Yeah, well, go. Hurry up. Everybody's, I can hardly wait. So, in the Army one day, they had a function, one of these little functions, where the officers are all dressed up, and the PFCs are expected to get their uniforms pressed, wear their clean suit. And have you ever, do any of you know anything about the full dress ceremonial uniform of the Army? You ever seen it? I mean, the real ceremonial uniform. Well, I recall a fantastic thing that I saw happen. We had this little second lieutenant, a little guy who had just gotten his ROTC commission, and that bright face, that wonderful clean set of fatigues, and he's always out there. He had new, absolutely brand spanking new, beautiful, clean bars, big ones, that shone in the sun. There wasn't a scratch on them. And we had been through like about 2.5 years, this outfit that I'm in. This is a new second lieutenant. He has joined us in what they call a a replacement depot. And he's sharp. And one afternoon, he is going into town. We're all standing around getting our passes. And this kid comes down from the BOQ. And he is wearing a blue uniform with an orange silk stripe. He's got a blue cape with orange silk lining. He's got shoulder boards. He's got a blue hat with gold stuff running all the way around it with little thin orange piping. We were in the Signal Corps, and our color was orange. And this guy walked down the street. He had been in the Army about 4 months, and he had bought the whole works, stuff which guys who had been in the Army 100 years didn't have. The old veterans. It went out somewhere with the Indian Wars. And he bought one. He's got a sword. He is going into town. And we're all looking at this guy, walking past. And he was one of the most pathetic sights I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it's like a girl who has got a fantastic form, one of these purple ones. I mean, these awful-looking ones. The kinds with the satin runs down and the little things that run around and the artificial flowers that run down this thing, with the gold puffs. And she's got a corsage on, and she's fat with glasses. And everybody else is wearing little thin black dresses. And everybody just stood and watched him. He walked right on down. He's trying to brazen it out. His cape is flying. And you can hear his sword going tink, tink, tink. And here all the GIs are standing around, they're looking. They're watching this. I had never seen it before. I thought it was a Mason or something. I really did, I didn't know what it was. And Gasser comes out of the day room. And he says, "What's that?" He thought it was some big party. They were having some kind of a concert. He said, "Hey, what's that? What are you wearing, Mac?" He didn't know it was the second lieutenant. He's down there, and the guy turns around, his poor little gold shoulder boards and his sword hanging. He says, "At ease, men." Everybody stands. He says, "As you were. Nobody's going to make a fool out of an officer." We're all standing there. Not one of us has made a fool out of him. But, oh boy, that cape with the thing hanging. Well, for years, I wanted a knife, a Boy Scout knife. And one day, my Uncle Carl, this is a real story. I had this drinking uncle, real terrible drunk. And the biggest thing that ever happened to Uncle Carl was the time that my Aunt Min, who was his wife, threw his teeth down the air shaft. He had these teeth, he got from the relief. And she came running in. She thought he was running around on her, and she figured if she threw his teeth down the air shaft, he would look all shrunken. Well, you know that she threw them down the air shaft, and Carl went for the rest of his life with no teeth. He just gummed the salami. Well, Carl one day says to me, would you like, he says, a knife. He says, I'm going to give you a knife. Well, Uncle Carl gave me a knife that had red handles. It had a silver end here and a silver end here. And the knife was shaped like a lady's leg. You ever seen those knives? With the little shoe, at the bottom? And if you look at the insignia under the light and you tilt it the right way, you could see an actual live lady. She is wearing an interesting costume. Like nothing, Well, I got this knife, and it was such a great knife. I mean, I love this knife. I really dug this knife. And about 3 weeks later, I go down to the Boy Scout meeting. And everybody's got their scout knives out. A couple of guys got, just ordinary knives. And I've got hanging from my belt a knife shaped like a lady's leg. Well, Mr. Gordon came up and down. He says, what is the knife? What is that you got there? I says, it's a knife, Mr. Gordon. And he says, give me that knife. You can't bring that kind of stuff around to the Boy Scouts. He says, look at that. He had seen knives like this before, see? And he says, I'm going to keep this knife. Oh, by the way, that reminds me, I wonder how many third-grade teachers have confiscated a lot of stuff that they don't have the guts to buy. And on those long, quiet winter evenings, they leaf them over, I know certain pieces of literature. But here was my knife, and Gordon said to me, he says, you can't, this is a terrible thing. Bringing this knife down. Now, it sounds like I'm making it up, but it's not true. This actually happened. He says, this is an awful thing, and I want you to go home and tell your parents you cannot come back to the Boy Scouts unless you have a note from them saying this kind of thing will never happen again. You are corrupting my troop. My knife that Uncle Carl gave me. It was at that point that I began to know about this thing of what is in the eye of the beholder. And I go home and I say, Ma, Mr. Gordon took my knife away. She says, he took your knife away? And I had one of these mothers who never called anybody. She never thought in terms of calling the teacher when you loused up, it hit you. That kind of stuff. She really put you on your own mettle. And she says, what knife was that? And I said, well, the one that Uncle Carl gave. She said, what knife? My mother had never seen the knife. It was one of those things I kept under the icebox in the basement, along with my spicy detectives. And she says, what knife was that? And I said, Mr. Gordon took it. And she says, Mr. Gordon took it. Why did he take your knife? He took my knife. He took my knife. She says, what knife was that? Did you take my kitchen knife down there? I said, no. She said, what knife? I said, Uncle Carl gave me a knife. She said, I'm going to find out about that knife. And she called up Uncle Carl. And I'm sweating in the corner. She says, Carl, this was her brother-in-law. Carl, and she knew he was a drunk in a tank. Carl, did you give Jeannie a knife? She hangs up. She says, poor Mr. Gordon. She says, you tell him, for me, that the next time you bring a knife down there like that, I'll personally kill you. I said, what? My knife. And ever since that time, I realized that evil is only in the eye of the beholder. And speaking of evil, For the last 2 hours we've been here at the Limelight, and we're going to be back next week.